How is everybody doing this morning? 8:30 in Vegas. That's a very ambitious start time. I will need to talk to marketing about that. Well, thank you all again very much for coming out, taking time out of your days, out of your jobs, out of your lives to join us for a few days here for Lucene Revolution 2017. So very excited to be here with you all. This is just such an honor for us at Lucidworks to get to host such an event. As you know, this is probably the largest developer-centric search conference on the planet, and it's something that we're very proud of. And so we've got a lot of great sessions, a lot of great speakers as usual, content. It's going to be a really fun couple of days. Very excited to be here. Again, the wonderful Mandalay Bay. I heard you can't really call yourself a software company until you have your user conference in Vegas, so here we are. We're honored to be here. We're honored to be your hosts for this event. Obviously, we couldn't do this on our own. We want to thank all of our sponsors, and if we could give a round of applause for the folks that are helping us support this. And you'll see a lot of them out there in the foyer as well. So I just want to take maybe just a couple minutes and talk about something that I get a lot of questions about as the CEO of Lucidworks from customers, from community members, from investors, and that's, how do you think about building a company around something like an Apache Solr project? What is really the strategy when it comes to commercialization? And we take an approach that our number one goal and our focus is really about creating harmony within the community. If you think about Lucidworks and you think about a lot of companies that are out there that are supporting open source, and of course, Red Hat did a great job at this model and kind of, I think, paved the way for other companies that came behind it. There's a variety of ways that people try to really kind of commercialize. And I think there's a lot of sensitivity when you think about what are the goals to build a business, to support a project, but as well as sort of supporting customers. And so we've taken what we believe to be a slightly different approach than other folks and thought we would take a few minutes to just sort of talk about that and some of the values and some of the principles that we like to adhere to when we think about building our business. If you think about really any successful project, there's typically a company behind the scenes that's doing good on behalf of the project. And we think about our role is really to become the champion of the project, the champion of the committers. We, of course, want to provide resources and sponsorship wherever possible, so hosting things like the conference, hosting webinars for things like Solr launches, providing swag and t-shirts, investing some web dev effort as well, just ensuring that we're providing the right aesthetic around the project. But we're also focused very much on the community, on the committers. We, of course, employ a number of the committers for the Solr project, and it's important to us that their time is actually being donated back into the community effort, and we're putting as much useful code out there as possible that can be broadly adopted. What we don't believe in is withholding things from the community that we think can benefit the whole. Things like security, things like management, things like scale. These are capabilities that every user of Apache Solr can benefit from, and we see it as our responsibility as Lucidworks to start to drive that back in. And of course, the community provides a very unique amount of leverage for a technology such as Solr. If you think about search and all of the challenges that you have to tackle when it comes to language, when it comes to culture, when it comes to data types and the diversity of information that we're trying to manage, this is not something that one entity can successfully go tackle on their own. And so Solr is very unique in that we have such a broad range of people who are committing time, are committing knowledge, and committing features back into the core set. In addition to that, the community provides governance, especially in an Apache project such as Solr, that you simply don't get in other technology. Those assurances around things like upgrades, things like roadmaps, ensuring that the project is going to stay consistent with the goals. And so we're very privileged that we can leverage all of this great work that's going on out there, that's solving challenges that we would never even think of in areas of healthcare, in areas of government, in areas of social impact. And we're able to leverage all of the knowledge that comes with that from the thousands and tens of thousands of developers and users that are out there. And then, of course, our core committer community as well, who's donating time and donating resources back into the project. So at the end of the day, we see our role as a company to be a guardian of that project. We don't own the technology. We don't own the community efforts that are out there. We're simply here to provide the support and the resources necessary to ensure its success, to provide visibility where we can, and to provide the overall user community with an entity which they can go to for support and other things like that. But like I said about, in the Lucidworks case, when we think about products that we want to bring to market and how we delineate between what are things that go back into the open source and what are things that we actually commercialize, there's a number of ways that companies think about this. And I talked before about things like, oh, we'll create a security module and hold that back, or create something like distribution and scale and hold that back. Well, in our case, what we're trying to do is we're looking at capabilities that really extend beyond what would benefit every user of that platform. Things that are specific to certain industry verticals, things that are specific to certain use cases. And so we went out and we talked to a number of folks and tried to determine what are the areas in which people were struggling. Now, what was true to kind of our DNA and the way that we wanted to build was, of course, relying on that sort of open core mentality where everything gets built on top of Solr. Why not? It's the most widely deployed search engine on the planet. It serves trillions of transactions per day. People use Solr every single day, whether they're banking, whether they're on social media, whether you're shopping online, you're hitting one of these instances. And so it's one of the most reliable and stable platforms out there for delivering content. But in addition to that, from our perspective, it gives our customers a peace of mind, because your data is actually stored inside of this Apache license container. You own that data. And so this fear of sort of vendor lock-in and things that we've seen that happen in the market in the past tend to go away a bit. And so when we kind of went down this journey and started building out our roadmap, we started talking to members of the community both inside and outside of the company, and we wanted to really understand what are the things that they care about. And again, how do we create that harmonious relationship between the commercial entity and the stuff that we're trying to do out there in the community? Excuse me. Y'all make me so nervous. I get so dry mouth. So when we think about the community and the things that they care about, we've got stuff like technical debt, obviously, the overall footprint, the creating more tests and creating more overhead on top of the project, especially things that are unnecessary. But most importantly, what the community cared about in our survey was, are the things that we're contributing back affect more than a subset of the population? So again, we looked at our strategy to say, hey, there are capabilities that affect certain industry verticals, that affect certain use cases that we can extend and really build our commercial strategy around that extension and not trying to take something away that can benefit everybody. And then, of course, we talked to customers. Having been in the Solr business for a long time, providing services and support, we had a lot of visibility into what folks were doing with search. And we found that there were sort of two key themes that people kept running into in a number of their initiatives. Number one, and especially in the last 5 years here, comes down to sort of big data. Everybody's got more and more data. They're aggregating more data. They're going into these sort of science experiment-like mentalities around things like data lakes, and they're failing to see value. And that value, and if you've been to a couple revolutions in the past, we've talked about this whole idea of moving away from infrastructure into applications, because we want to make this data available and useful for people. It's no good if we're simply just investing in more hardware and more storage, and we're just putting more information that's ungoverned that we can't deliver to our applications and to our end users. Or even more importantly, we're not leveraging that information in a way to help us make better decisions. And so ultimately, it came down to this simple statement where big data had a big user problem. We were not getting the adoption, or customers were not getting the adoption that they had hoped from all of this information that they were collecting and aggregating. And then secondly, it was that user expectation that had started to evolve. Because our customers are coming in, and if we have something that's sort of more consumer-facing, they've been trained by Amazon in terms of what is that data experience that they should expect. That productive delivery of information, that actionable information that sort of predicts where it is that I want to engage. And then our employees were saying, I'm using these internal applications and they're frustrating, and frankly, they're quite dumb at times because I know the information's in there, yet I have to go through all these hoops to go get them. And again, if you think about where those expectations are being shifted, it's places like Google. And so more and more, as sort of the landscape is changing and really the canvas is changing, that user experience moves away from being about, okay, what are the widgets and the knobs and the mouse overs and all the pretty things that we can put in front of the screen, to, am I getting the most relevant information? Am I getting the most actionable data? And so that's ultimately our goal, was to sort of look at how do we take these two challenges and how do we take the best search engine on the planet and develop a product which we can bring to the market to help solve those challenges while leveraging the best of what goes on inside of the open source community. And so if you think about sort of the consumer and the enterprise, there was a whole ton of features that needed to be delivered to deliver on this promise. And without it, companies were struggling. They were struggling to innovate and to bring new products to market, struggling to inform customers, to support customers, to sell. And the impact is pretty obvious when we're not doing these things correctly. And so we wanted to develop a platform in which we could extend from that open source and bring those capabilities to market in a way that our customers could be successful in delivering on that promise of user expectation. Now, pretty much everybody in this room is a search professional, and I think you'll sort of appreciate kind of the next perspective that we gained, and that was really this idea of a continuum. You know, the maturity of applications within the enterprise and the sophistication in which they want to be brought in. And we saw it in 4 stages in the conversations that we were having. The first being, of course, you know, I've got to decide on a platform. I got to get something up and running. I want to load information into it. I want to pull data out of it and sort of get to that MVP. From there, we want to go beyond single sources or single types of information and extend into the broader data ecosystem that exists within the enterprise, so we're leveraging everything at our disposal. Of course, what comes next, I don't know if Doug Trumbull's in the audience, his favorite topic, which is the relevancy. Now we've got the applications up, we've got the data in, are we delivering the right results back into our users? And the answer was typically no in a lot of these cases, and so that focus on relevancy. And then, of course, people who had been watching Jeopardy and seeing all these things, and I talked to a number of CIOs, are saying, you know, why can't I just have a chatbot? You know, why don't you just stand up one of those things and does question and answering and predictions and all of this great stuff? And the truth is that is an attainable goal, but as most people here in the audience know, that this is not something that you can just turn on overnight. There's a lot of investment, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of work that goes into this. And what was more interesting is when we talked to our customers, as much as all of their bosses and people were telling them, yeah, I need to have everything out here at the end of the continuum because we want to be driving this intelligent data experience, the reality was, you know what, it's actually this year it's more important that I take this half a dozen or dozen applications that I have and I get them into that relevancy stage. And so combining sort of those gaps in expectation delivery, the problems with big data, and the need to deliver on every step of the continuum, this is what inspired us to go build our Fusion stack. And our goal is to give you leverage. It's to give you leverage at every single step of this journey. And there'll be cases like in retail where we want to move all the way to the end because we're trying to create a transactional experience within our users. Or there's cases in the enterprise where I'm simply saying, hey, help me get 10 applications to the point where we're providing relevant information, or more importantly, we're actually delivering all of the information that we have at our disposal. So that's why we built Fusion. We took that open core mentality, we took the best-in-class open source with Solr. We leveraged Spark for some of our processing so we can build our recommendation engines and our classification engines. We ensure that you can get all of your data all the time, regardless of where it lives, and so having the connectors and the framework to go out and support that data ingest. And then our layer of intelligence, which can ensure that you're getting the right relevancy on that data, whether we want to manually implement something like rules to really editorialize or curate an experience, or we want to start leveraging feedback loops and user interaction so we can be a little more predictive around our stack. So last year, what we realized, though, that there was still a piece missing from our vision. Because more and more users were getting better access, but they were getting stalled at actually bringing these applications online. And a lot of that came towards the bottlenecks of things like UI development. And so we were introduced to a company last year by a customer of ours who said, hey, these folks are doing some really exciting things in the world of search UIs, and it's very adaptable, and we want you to go work with them because we want to deploy Fusion and this technology called Twigkit side by side. And so we met the team, and we started working with the technology, and we found that, wow, this was actually truly exciting. Because not only was it beautiful and elegant and slick, It was very quick to develop, it was quick to deploy, it was built from that developer mentality of, hey, let me take advantage of libraries and tags and things that I can rapidly stand up and prototype, and I can start to ship things faster, start to get user feedback faster and iterate. It also ran across all web and mobile platforms. And so after working with these folks for a while, and we realized, we have a shared vision in terms of what's possible in the world of data and the world of search. And if you saw our announcement back in May, we actually ended up acquiring Twigkit and bringing them into the Lucidworks team. And it's something we're very excited about, and you'll see some of the folks here, and you can see more about it at our booth. And so this was our first acquisition, and it was one that just made a ton of sense, because not only, again, did the technology provide us with hundreds of modules that talk directly to search engines, and by the way, not just Solr and Fusion. In fact, it talks to pretty much every search engine out there. But it was really that vision and that culture that we shared with the team that felt like we were much better off working together as a unit than two companies side by side. And so with Twigkit, we get the ability to, again, rapidly build and deploy these beautiful web UIs and things like your traditional faceted search interface, but then really going much deeper than that. Because as we know, search can be applied in so many different contexts. It can be used to drive analytics and data visualization. And so going beyond even the traditional interfaces that we're used to and getting into more of data discovery applications and UI and visualization applications that can be deployed for a variety of use cases. So with that, I'm very excited to bring to the stage his first time presenting as a member of the Lucidworks team, the former Chief Executive Officer of Twigkit, who's now the Chief Strategy Officer for Lucidworks, Stefan Olafsson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Well, I also get a musical number. That's quite something. So we're extremely excited to be now sort of sharing that stage with Lucidworks. You would all be forgiven for having never heard of Twigkit, but we sort of made a little number for ourselves, a little name, by creating a suite of applications that allowed anyone to sort of very quickly build search apps without having to have sort of too much, sort of development experience. But in many ways, Twigkit was always like the last runner in a very long relay, right? So we take the baton from people like you or Lucidworks, and it would be up to us to sort of get it across the finish line and deliver it on any device to sort of people so that they could actually do their job and work with it. But in the last sort of couple of years, we also reached a maturity where we sort of recognized that the next step change in capabilities would require us to dig a lot deeper. We would have to have a lot more control over how data is acquired and treated. And we had some ideas around that, but as it happened, we sort of shared a lot of the same ideals as Grant and Will and the Lucidworks team. So despite the fact that we were coming at the problem from completely opposite ends of the spectrum, we sort of auto-completed each other. We thought this was a great idea, and it would also mean that we would be in that unique position where this was no longer a relay. We would set the pace. We would control the entire race. And that would mean that sort of we would cover the entire life cycle from the sort of very moment that data is created to the time that we deliver it to the front line. So whether that's banks fighting fraud or whether it's people at the cutting edge of science trying to develop new drugs, we would sort of remain more committed, if you will, to that end user result than ever before. So I think it still remains true, and we all believe this, that where the real value is created is at that coalface, sort of where people and technology intersect. So that's what we will remain very focused on. But being truly end-to-end will hopefully then mean that we can sort of deliver better information and much sort of deeper insights in more meaningful ways than we were doing before as a sole entity. So with that being said, I wanted to give you a little glimpse at what we're now calling App Studio, and how App Studio will help you bootstrap applications with more sort of purpose and accuracy than ever before. Will I get music for that, or no? So this is App Studio, and what has changed from the sort of original Twigkit days was this is now sort of a standalone package that you can just sort of download and you do app start, and this is what you see. And I'm really pleased to be able to announce that Lucidworks will be releasing a community edition of this so that you can all make the sort of very most of your technology, which is open source search, and do the same sort of things. So the first thing that would happen normally when we were working with a customer was we would have to connect to an index and we would have to show them their data. So that would always mean a little bit of sort of, coding and config. But what it means now is you can take any sort of URL to a search engine, I think, if I can actually drag it, and sort of drag it in here. This could be, in this case, it's a Fusion URL, but it could easily be Solr or anything else, because what will happen is we will connect to the index and it will detect the sort of beast it's dealing with. And the next stage, I'm being challenged by Fusion here, and I will need to provide some sort of authentication. So I'll type that in. There are a couple of realms, so it will sort of now validate that connection, but this is when the sort of real magic starts happening. So it's telling me these are the sort of collections of data I have in there. And if I pick one of them, it will start to sort of guide me on my journey. It will say these are the sort of data handlers that exist in there, and it could be any bunch of them, but it's sort of recommending this one for me. So what we will do next is start sort of looking at the data that exists in there, and we will do lots of sampling of it and see what's coming back. And in this case, the typical sort of layout that you might have would be sort of title and a description and some metadata. So to give me more insights, it's already picked a field for me that it deems is a good title, and it gives me some sample values here. I could obviously change it to something else, and this might help me guide here, but I'll stick with this suggestion. There's also just one field that has a URL, so I'll keep that. Same with description. Here are some suggestions that rather than having to go through the index and figure out what's there, we sort of try and guide you in this journey. The next bit, as you will all know, is sort of the real power of search is how facets and dynamic navigation can give me insights into a big result set. So what we do here is we get a bunch of facets back. I can choose which ones to show, but if you flick over this card, you can see that there's this sort of Twigkit markup behind the scenes. So I can see here that there's a facet called data source. I'm going to choose to keep that. I can see which values are in there, and that it covers a lot of my content. You can rename it, and you can see that the sort of markup is being updated. I also want to show that information alongside each result. And next one is authors. We'll keep that, but you can see here that App Studio is giving me a recommendation. There's a lot of values in that facet, so you might want to enable search within it. So we'll rename that too from the sort of geeky name, authors, and we'll include that in results. So the sort of last step here is in the bootstrapping process is I name my application, my cool app, pick a theme. And what is happening now is it's just bootstrapping that Twigkit application, and it's taking away all that effort that was sort of involved in getting to that first mile. So what you can see now is an application I can put in front of my customers and show them their data, going through it in real time. And then what Will is going to show you is the sort of next mile, if you will, which is where we start tailoring this to the customer's needs. But you can see here that in 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it was, you have now a fully up and running application that has been guided by the data that's coming back. So with that, I'll hand back over to Will, and he's going to show you all of this in a single platform.
Thanks, Albert. Very cool. So again, as you can see, this really helps tie our whole vision together in terms of what we want to deliver to you all, deliver out to the market, as well as with the Community Edition, which is going to allow you to take advantage of the Twigkit markup language and the rapid development framework that these folks have worked so long on. But there was still one other area that we felt that we needed to deliver value for our customers. We wanted to rest on our laurels and say, we've got App Studio, we're now got the whole end-to-end solution. But the reality is that folks are still struggling when it comes to the deployment and the scale of search at times. And not only are they struggling, but in certain cases, you start to think about your data and where your data lives and the heterogeneous environments in which we live in. And it doesn't always make sense to run everything on-prem, to manage and to build your own search engine. So we're also very excited to announce today the beta program for the Fusion Cloud platform. What Fusion Cloud is all of the power of the Lucidworks Fusion platform delivered as an easy-to-consume SaaS application. This means that intelligent search really comes with that simplicity that you would expect from a service. Scale gets much easier because as you load data, Fusion Cloud will continue to scale those instances for you. So no longer having to think about how do I replicate, how do I manage my larger cluster, how do I upgrade? We build this on the latest stable release of Solr, so you're always getting the best of what's underneath the hood, coupled with all of the power of Fusion. And so the architecture is quite elegant. You can think about this as an API where you can push data to, you can pull data out of. But unlike a lot of the cloud services that are out there today, this is not just a data retrieval API. We have a variety of microservices that take advantage of all of the capabilities of Fusion and make them easy to access endpoints. So on the data ingest side, you get access to our connector SDK. You can push and pull data from anywhere, including on-prem. You can take advantage of the 60+ connectors that come with Fusion. We have all of the data enrichment services as part of that, so as you want to provide transformations and lookups and security obfuscation, all of that becomes available to you. And then on the retrieval side, doing things like rules and relevancy tuning and security trimming are all available, all the way to the end with our intelligence services. So wrapping things like our recommendation engine and query classification, query intent into easy-to-consume services in the cloud. And in the future, this cloud technology that we're building will also be available for you to orchestrate your own search clusters on-prem as well. But our goal is to really deliver value wherever your data lives. If your data is in the cloud, why should I be pulling it down? If I have data that I don't need to manage on-prem, that I simply want to offload that work off to Lucidworks, we want to make that available for you as well. I think one of the cool things, and thanks to the Twigkit acquisition, we actually have different consumption models for this data as well. And so you have your traditional API approach, where I simply want to pull some data back within my cloud application or a separate application. We can embed those APIs for things like web search or retail if you want to install directly inside of something like a Shopify. But we also have a number of application templates that can really bootstrap that experience and allow you to bring a secure application back into the enterprise quickly. So we're starting in the beta, we're launching with enterprise search, but we have retail and customer service on our roadmap as well. And the power of of all of that intelligence behind Fusion, we've brought into this concept called smart panels. And so what a smart panel does is it takes all of the signal information. So let's take something like a recommendation where users are clicking and ranking information. Well, that data gets captured, that data gets aggregated in the background, and then we present that as a simple API where you can simply embed one of these panels inside of your application. Now, you can do that within our UI template, or you can take that API and you can embed that into your own application. So for things like retail, where you want to coexist inside of a hosted Shopify instance or Magento instance, we make that incredibly easy. So I thought what I would do here very quickly was show you a live demo. And I can see all my engineering team cringing. They kept saying, "Are you sure you don't want to just play a video?" I know what I'm doing here, guys, kind of. So if I can just switch to my screen here. And all of this, App Studio, the cloud demos, our retail solutions, all of that is available to see at the Lucidworks booth as well. But just wanted to kind of show very quickly here, you can see a sample application. And again, there's a variety of templates that we have thanks to the Twigkit framework that we have underneath the hood. So I can come in here and I can type in something like rows. And I've indexed data. There we go. Let's see what the demo gods have in store for. Oh, look at that. And you can see things, for instance, like here, I've indexed data from Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Open Data Project, all of their purchase order information. By the way, and I wish we had invited these folks here, the Las Vegas data sets are some of the cleanest, most accessible data sets I've ever seen. And you can imagine we work with a lot of open and a lot of public data sets. So kudos to those folks. I don't believe we have anybody here in the audience, but it's very cool. Or in other cases, things like my documents from places like G Drive, I can type in Solr here or Solr Hadoop. Obviously get things like my type ahead immediately. But again, the beauty here is not only do you get this application, but if you want to simply see what's going on under the hood in our GA release, you can simply take that API call and embed that into your own application. And if I click on a document here that was authored by our very own Andy Wibbles, I can see other related documents that are coming from Andy. Now, back here, if I want to start to modify things like my facets and that simply just becomes a widget. I come in and I can start adding new things, or I can start removing as well. And I also have total control over the page layout. So if I do something like under my data sources here, and I want to go look at that purchase order information, you can see I index that from a CSV file. but now I'm actually providing ways to map and configure that data. So you can actually pick from these different UI templates that you want in terms of how you want that data to be displayed. And I can see the different result templates. You can create your own as well. And so what we're trying to do is give you total control over that application, particularly with those enterprise applications where we want to stand things up quickly, get them deployed quickly. But in other cases, you can use this as sort of a staging or a framing environment to start to determine the right data experience and then simply take those panels and get them embedded somewhere else within your application. But here you can see here, I can take advantage of all the different fields and how I want to actually display and use that. And of course, like my synonyms and my tags, and as you've seen, we're going to start adding more and more of these smart panels to make things like recommendations and that much easier for you. So just a very simple CEO demo. Obviously, folks over in the booth can take you into much more detail about the cloud offering and about the Fusion stack as a whole.